This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kirsten Ferreri. Dear Enemy by Gene Webster. Part 6. JGH, April 1st. Dear Judy, I have placed out Isidor Gutschneider. His new mother is a Swedish woman, fat and smiling, with blue eyes and yellow hair. She chose him out of the whole nursery full of children because he was the brunettest baby there. She has always loved brunettes, but in her most ambitious dreams has never hoped to have one of her own. His name is going to be changed to Oscar Carlson, after his new dead uncle. My first trustees' meeting is to occur next Wednesday. I confess that I am not looking forward to it with impatience, especially as an inaugural address by me will be its chief feature. I wish our president were here to back me up, but at least I am sure of one thing. I am never going to adopt the Uriah Heepish attitude toward trustees that characterized Mrs. Lippett's matters. I shall treat first Wednesdays as a pleasant social diversion. My day at home with friends of the asylum gather for discussion and relaxation, and I shall endeavor not to let our pleasures discommode the orphans. You see how I have taken to heart the unhappy experiences of that little Jerusha. Your last letter has arrived, and no suggestion in it of traveling north. Isn't it about time that you were turning your faces back toward Fifth Avenue? Heim is heim beter se heimly. Don't you marvel at the Scotch that flows so readily from my pen? Since being acquaint with Sandy, I ha' gathered a muckle new vocabulary. The dinner gong. I leave you to devote a revivifying half-hour to mutton hash. We eat to live in the John Grier home. 6 o'clock. The Onsai has been calling again. He drops in with great frequency, hoping to catch me in delictu. How I do not like that man. He is a pink, fat, puffy old thing with a pink, fat, puffy soul. I was in a very cheery, optimistic frame of mind before his arrival, but now I shall do nothing but grumble for the rest of the day. He deplores all of the useless innovations that I am endeavoring to introduce, such as a cheerful playroom, pretty clothes, baths and better food, and fresh air and play and fun and ice cream and kisses. He says I will unfit these children to occupy the position in life that God has called them to occupy. At that my Irish blood came to the surface, and I told him that if God had planned to make all of these 113 little children into useless, ignorant, unhappy citizens, that I was going to fool God, that we weren't educating them out of their class in the least. We were educating them into their natural class much more effectively than is done in the average family. We weren't trying to force them into college if they hadn't any brains, as happens with rich men's sons, and we weren't putting them to work at 14 if they were naturally ambitious, as happens with poor men's sons. We were watching them closely and individually and discovering their level. If our children showed an aptitude to become farm laborers and nursemaids, we were going to teach them to become the best possible farm laborers and nursemaids. And if they showed a tendency to become lawyers, we would turn them into honest, intelligent, open-minded lawyers. He's a lawyer himself, but certainly not an open-minded one. He grunted when I had finished my remarks, and stirred his tea vigorously, whereupon I suggested that perhaps he needed another lump of sugar, and dropped it in, and left him to absorb it. The only way to deal with trustees is with a firm and steady hand. You have to keep them in their places. Oh, my dear, that smudge in the corner was caused by Singapore's black tongue. He's trying to send you an affectionate kiss. Poor Sing thinks he's a lapdog. Isn't it a tragedy when people mistake their vocations? I myself am not always certain that I was born an orphan asylum superintendent. Yours till death, S. McB. Superintendent's Office, John Grier Home, April 4th. The Pendleton Family, Palm Beach, Florida. Dear Sir and Madam, I have weathered my first visitor's day, and made the trustees a beautiful speech. Everybody said it was a beautiful speech, even my enemies. Mr. Gordon Halleck's recent visit was exceptionally opportune. I gleaned from him many suggestions as to how to carry an audience. Be funny. I told about Sadie Kate and a few other cherubs that don't know. Keep it concrete and fitted to the intelligence of your audience. I watched the Honorable Cy and never said a thing that he couldn't understand. Flatter your hearers. I hinted delicately that all of these new reforms were due to the wisdom and initiative of our peerless trustees. Give it a high moral tone with a dash of pathos. I dwelt upon the parentless condition of these little wards of society, and it was very affecting. My enemy wiped away a tear. Then I fed them up on chocolate and whipped cream and lemonade and tartar sandwiches, and sent them home, expansive and beaming, without any appetite for dinner. I dwell thus at length upon our triumph, in order to create in you a happy frame of mind, before passing to the hideous calamity that so nearly wrecked the occasion. Now follows the dim horror of my tale, and I feel I'm growing gradually pale, for even at this day, though its smell has passed away, when I venture to remember it, I quail. You never heard of our little Tammas Kehoe, did you? I simply haven't featured Tammas because he requires so much ink and time and vocabulary. He's a spirited lad, and he follows his dad, a mighty hunter of old. That sounds like more Bab ballads, but it isn't. I made it up as I went along. We can't break Tammas of his inherited predatory instincts. He shoots the chickens with bows and arrows, and lassos the pigs, and plays bullfight with the cows, and, oh, is very destructive. But his crowning villainy occurred an hour before the trustees' meeting, when we wanted to be so clean and sweet and engaging. It seems that he had stolen the rat trap from the oat bin, and had set it up in the woodlot, and yesterday morning was so fortunate as to catch a fine big skunk. Singapore was the first to report the discovery. He returned to the house and rolled on the rugs in a frenzy of remorse over his part of the business. While our attention was occupied with Sing, Tammas was busily skinning his prey in the seclusion of the woodshed. He buttoned the pelt inside his jacket, conveyed it by a devious route through the length of this building, and concealed it under his bed, where he thought it wouldn't be found. Then he went, per schedule, to the basement to help freeze the ice cream for our guests. You will notice that we omitted ice cream from the menu. In the short time that remained, we created all the counter-irritation that was possible. Noah, the negro furnace man, started smudge fires at intervals about the grounds. Cook waved a shovelful of burning coffee through the house. Betsy sprinkled the corridors with ammonia. Miss Snaith daintily treated the rugs with violet water. I sent an emergency call to the doctor, who came and mixed a gigantic solution of chlorid of lime. But still, above and beneath and through every other odor, the unlaid ghost of Tammas's victim cried for vengeance. The first business that came up at the meeting was whether we should dig a hole and bury not only Tammas, but the whole main building. You can see with what finesse I carried off the shocking event, when I tell you that the Honourable Cy went home chuckling over a funny story, instead of grumbling at the new superintendent's inability to manage boys. We've our ain bit weird to dree. As ever, S. McBride. The John Grier Home. Friday, likewise Saturday. Dear Judy, Singapore is still living in the carriage house and receiving a daily carbolic-scented bath from Tammas Kehoe. I am hoping that some day in the distant future my darling will be fit to return. You will be pleased to hear that I have instituted a new method of spending your money. We are henceforth to buy a part of our shoes and dry goods and drugstore comestibles from local shops, not at quite such low prices as the wholesale jobbers give, but still at a discount, and the education that is being thrown in is worth the difference. The reason is this: I have made the discovery that half of my children know nothing of money or its purchasing power. They think that shoes and cornmeal and red flannel petticoats and mutton stew and gingham shirts just float down from the blue sky. Last week I dropped a new green dollar bill out of my purse, and an 8-year-old urchin picked it up and asked if he could keep that picture of a bird, American eagle in the center. That child had never seen a bill in his life. I began an investigation and discovered that dozens of children in this asylum have never bought anything or ever seen anybody buy anything, and we are planning to turn them out at 16 into a world governed entirely by the purchasing power of dollars and cents. Good heavens! Just think of it. They are not to lead sheltered lives with somebody eternally looking after them. They've got to know how to get the very most they can out of every penny they can manage to earn. I pondered the question all one night at intervals, and went to the village at 9 o'clock the next morning. I held conferences with 7 storekeepers, found 4 open-minded and helpful, and 2 doubtful, and 1 actively stupid. I have started with the 4, dry goods, groceries, shoes, and stationery. In return for somewhat large orders from us, they are to turn themselves and their clerks into teachers for my children, who are to go to the stores, inspect the stocks, and do their own purchasing with real money. For example, Jane needs a spool of blue sewing silk and a yard of elastic. So two little girls, entrusted with a silver quarter, trot hand in hand to Mr. Meeker's. They match the silk with anxious care, and watch the clerk jealously while he measures the elastic. To make